This is Dave Comerford interviewing Candace McLaughlin on March 6, 2012. Okay, so why did your parents decide to send you to the lab school rather than the public schools in Macomb?
That's a good question. My mom was from Macomb and had attended Western for 2 years, and then she actually transferred to Macomb High, but she had a sister and a brother who went all the way through Western High. And she transferred because some of her friends were at the other school, but I think she recognized that the best education at that time, at point in time, was at Western High. And so she got my brother, and he had to get on a waiting list, basically. So when we were born, she just contacted the school and got on the list so that we both, I think, and I don't know this for sure, but I think once a sibling got in, then the other ones automatically were able to.
So she did that when you were born?
Yeah, shortly thereafter, if not then, because she said they got
foresight.
on waiting lists. Yeah, well, and she'd been through the school system because she was from here, so I think she'd had time to think about it, and you know, she loved her education at Macomb High, but something I can't tell you what it was, but I know she had she was one of 5, so 2 of her siblings went to Western High, and 3 actually graduated from Macomb High, but she must have felt that in retrospect that Western High was a better choice.
Was there like a rivalry there between
those
2 schools?
Yeah. At least when I was there, and I'm sure, over time. And it was, I remember when they merged the 2. My husband's sister was a senior at Western High, and she was going into her senior year and had to finish at Macomb High, and it was a very difficult year of transition because you were, the rivalry was still there, and they were absorbing all these kids that they had rivalry with all those years. So it was not an easy time for that group, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we were visited by Darlos Mummer and Warren Abbott, and they kind of gave us a tour of everything.
Cool.
And then they told us about some of the teachers, but I was just curious about like who were your favorite teachers, maybe.
Yeah.
And like memories from them.
Oh, sure. Well, Coach Sockler, who was is an icon in his own right, was our football coach, but he was also an excellent history teacher. So I loved having history from him. Miss Buckley was our English teacher for part of the time. Mrs. Stifler, who eventually became chair of the English department at Western, was an English teacher. We had the best teaching staff, and that's again another reason I think my mom wanted us there, is because the teachers there also were employed by the university, so they were hired and had higher standards for, I think, being able to teach there. They had to have master's degrees, and many had their doctorates. And when the school closed, a lot of them were absorbed by the university and taught and became very prominent in their own departments at the university level. So, but those 3 in particular, Dr. Kellogg was a biology teacher, and he wound up teaching biology at Western after the school closed. Dr. Scharfenberg was our art teacher, and he was one of our class sponsors, and he wound up teaching in the art department and retired from the art department at Western. Lois Mills was the librarian. She was the other class sponsor for us our senior year, and she wound up being the documents librarian here.
Oh, so that's interesting. Library. So they
were employed by the university
even as high school teachers,
right? Because it was a laboratory school, so it was part of the university. So their contracts were with the university.
Well, that's interesting for them. I mean,
because actually, my husband taught after we graduated college, and he came back and taught a year at Western High before it closed, and he was part of the university, because I was a faculty wife as a high school wife, as the wife of a high school teacher. I was part of faculty wives at the university.
Oh, okay.
So then when the school closed, I'm not sure they were able to absorb everybody, but many of the ones that I remembered became teachers then at the university.
What years were you at the school? You were there from kindergarten until your senior year?
Right.
So
and I had a 2-year kindergarten, so I think I started in 1950, because I would have been 4, because I had a 2-year half-day kindergarten at that time. And then 1964 is when I graduated.
1964.
Yeah.
Okay. And at that point you were
18.
Okay.
17.
That makes sense.
18.
Okay.
I was 17 when I graduated. I turned 18 in July, right after that. My birthday was in the summer.
That's interesting. Well, I'm interested in the fact that it was a school, like a grade school and a high school on a college campus, and the interactions with college students on your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like it would be kind of, I don't know, like scary maybe?
I don't know.
No?
Well, number one, back then, you have to remember that the university population was much smaller than it is now. It was probably more in the 500 to 1,000 and 1,000 to 2,000 than now. Because I think when I started at Western, the population at Western at that time was only 4,000. So, think about in terms of the number of people, there just weren't as many as there are now. Plus, we were kind of isolated. I mean, we saw the students when they came to the building, because the entire building was the high school, so there weren't people passing through like here. When they came, they were coming to observe.
Okay.
And if you visited the high school and the grade school, you noticed how the classrooms were built, where you had the partitions, and you had seats on one side and then seats on the other. For a lot of them, well, that was to accommodate a college class to watch
you. Yeah,
the class.
I have all my most of my classes in Simpkins, so I can kind of see that. Was that weird, like having people stare at you?
Yeah, I think it was the first time, but then
you got used to it.
You just really didn't realize they were there. And there were always rumors going about how then we'd have student teachers, of course. Every semester you'd have student teachers in every class, because that was the training ground for them. And and some of the students, not me, of course, I was an angel, but there were many that would make it as hard as they could on the student teachers. So the joke was, if you could survive, student teaching at Western High, you could survive.
That's funny.
Period.
Yeah, that's what they were saying. Darlis and Warren, when they came, they said that it was like that, like it was very like a gauntlet almost.
Yeah. If you could do it there, you could do it anywhere. That's the old thing.
Well, have you heard anything about the school being part of FDR's like New Deal after? Nothing about that?
No, I haven't heard that.
We heard something about that.
And that may be the case. I don't know.
Yeah, I was interested about that.
Because my mom actually first went to school in Sherman Hall. If you notice, when you walk through Sherman, you see some of the biology etched there. It was, the high school was there, and then it moved to the art gallery, which is behind, and then Simpkins was built. So it was kind of a progression. And I'm not sure what the rationale was, or what size it was in Sherman, but it grew obviously when it became kindergarten through senior year. And when Simpkins Hall was built, it must have grown enough they needed their own building, because that was there obviously when I started.
And how was that, having as a child, first, second, third grade, with high school students in the same building as you?
It was great, because it was so small and you knew everybody. Yeah. And you almost always had a sibling of somebody who was in high school in your grade or in a grade on either side of you. So, like Abbott, I was not in school exactly at the same time they were, but I knew him because I know, number one, they're from Macomb, and I knew the Abbotts because there were like 20 of them. I mean, there were a lot of Abbotts. And so there was one somewhere within my scheme of 4 years when you're paying most attention to stuff. So you were close to them, you were close to their kids, their brothers and sisters, their parents, and because when it was, every class was about 50 students. I think it was 51 in our class, but it was limited. They didn't go over that 50 or 55 mark. So and then you figure your whole high school is 200 students.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, that's not.
Yeah, and then you add the grade school to it. You really kind of know everybody.
Yeah.
And you're on different floors when you're going up. I mean, the grades, the high school had the top floor. Yeah. But then you had the junior high on the floor below it, and then you had the grades below that. So in most cases, you could go all week and not really see anybody else, unless you had an assembly where everybody got together, or in the lunchrooms, and they had separate times for that and stuff like that. So. I think and again, you got to remember, it's just a different climate back then than there was now. There wasn't, I don't think there was the bullying or the teasing or, that kind of stuff that's going on now. So back then it was just, it was normal to all be in the same building.
Yeah, sounds nice.
Yeah, it was. It really was. I think that's one of the things that made it unique was it was a real family feeling with the whole school. Yeah.
Well, do you have any, specific best memories from your time?
Oh, I got so many. I don't know where I could start. Well, I met my husband when we were freshmen, and we started dating as sophomores. So of course, all my memories gravitate around that because we're still married.
So you met him when you were a freshman in high school, but did he go the whole time?
No, he came as a freshman. Okay. He was actually recruited to play football by Coach Sockler. Oh, okay. Because his brother went to Macomb High. Oh, okay. But his mom had been. This is a long story, but his mom actually had been in high school with my mom. But then they left, came back, and had traveled around quite a bit. And then when they were coming back, Coach Sockler, he was a good football player, so he actually actively recruited him to come to Western. And football had a pull then because it was a very successful team. Yeah. So he was able to do that without being on a wait list or anything like that. He could come in as a freshman. So we met and then started dating as sophomores and just kept dating. Yeah. So a lot of the memories gravitate around sports, and I was a cheerleader and he was football, and so we did a lot of the that kind of
classic
memory
stuff.
things.
Yeah.
I was homecoming queen, he was king of the whole 60s thing.
Well,
like
that's
that.
cool.
But, yeah,
That's
it was
great.
fun.
Well, that sounds pretty standard. So there wasn't. Were you aware of the counterculture at the time in the 60s?
Yes, because my brother was part of it.
Oh, really?
He was 2 years older than I was. He was also a Western High grad.
Okay.
But he got very much into the folk music and played in a group with college kids as a junior and senior in high school. So I was part of that. Part of it. I mean, not
So you kind of had both
part, but
worlds.
actually, I was a sorority in college, and my brother was the hippie. So it was kind of my parents got a little bit of everything. It was really kind of fun, very eclectic.
That's cool.
But one of my real vivid memories is when I was in 6th grade. We used to go take the tunnel. You know about the tunnel?
Yeah.
Between Simpkins and Sherman.
That was looked down upon, right? You weren't supposed to do that.
Yeah, but we did.
Yeah.
Because there was a candy place in the place called the Cave.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's still there. I think it might be, but the tunnel's closed, obviously. But we would go there and get snacks during the lunch hour. But we went there one time, and we came back. We came up the stairway and opened the door, and Coach Sockler and Miss Hoeing, who was our 6th grade teacher, were waiting for us. So somehow they got wind that we had gone. And individually, they were frightening people. I mean, stern, but together it was just really overwhelming. And so that's a memory that has stuck with me. Is like I would never do that again.
So you guys, you and just a couple friends snuck over there?
Yeah, and I believe we were bonded for life. I can't remember for sure, but it was...
what was the punishment like there for things like that? Just
I don't even remember. I'm sure we were just talked sternly too, and back then we would, okay, I'll never do it again. We took it seriously.
I can't imagine they wouldn't think kids would always want to go down.
I know.
There's a
or
tunnel.
then they did finally lock the door when they didn't want. Because I think after time it probably became a rather dangerous place to be because they'd store stuff down there for one thing, excess furniture and stuff. So it was not a real safe place. But we used to use it legally as a cut through to get to swimming because we would go to the old Morgan Gym, which is where the Courier is. The Courier building. There's a big place where there's basketball. There used to be a building there, and there's a swimming pool down underneath that whole thing that's now storage. But we used to have our swimming lessons for PE there, and we'd take the tunnel to get to it in the winter, so we didn't have to walk outside. So that was a traverse, thoroughfare for that purpose to get closer to Morgan Hall.
And did that happen often? Did you find yourself using like college facilities for your school?
Yeah, we used to. Well, the best memory when I was in junior high, 7th and 8th grade, I was a cheerleader, and our colors were purple and gold, like the university, and our team name was the Comets, where the high school was red and white Cardinals, but we were purple and gold Comets, and we would take the university bus to play basketball. So we would arrive in these little tiny towns, because we were a tiny school, in this big bus that had purple, gold, Western on it, and we'd get off, and these people would go. And we played, in high school, we played football on Hanson Field. That was our football field.
Oh, really?
So the same thing, you'd have these small teams coming in this giant venue. So it was an intimidation factor that was very cool.
Well, now the football team went undefeated for quite a while, right?
My husband was part of that team that was undefeated from, they lost one game sophomore year. And then they were undefeated junior and senior year, and then that streak continued after we graduated for I can't remember how many years, but he was part of that.
That's pretty impressive.
It was a really fun time.
But they wouldn't play Macomb High, right?
Well, partly because Macomb High was number-wise bigger.
Yeah.
So we weren't in the same conference, and I think they figured it would have been probably not a good.
Yeah.
Because you used to have bonfires, and they would attack each other's bonfires, So I think they used to play before my time. And I think they learned from that experience. It was
bad idea.
It's not tempt fate.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Or so there weren't many like cliques or anything like that.
Really, in the high school, there weren't. Huh. You had groups that were friends, but I don't ever remember feeling animosity toward any other group, either in my grade or in other grades. We really did seem more like a family than I think you get nowadays, and I think a lot of it's a function of the small size and the fact that everybody got to do everything, because there weren't very many of us, so you really had the opportunity to do stuff, to be organization leaders, to play in sports, because there just weren't hundreds and hundreds of people competing for the same spot, so everybody I think felt fulfilled in a way.
It's kind of similar to like a charter school now. Is that
might be
something that's kind of the vibe?
In terms of size, I'm not that familiar with the way the curriculum is, but I know academically it was very, very strong, and it was known to be really strong. And so I felt, and I think people at Western had this feeling of success because they experienced it in the classroom and in athletics or music or whatever. They had a great music programming. Dr. Gould was our music person, and he was, again, went on and did great things after the school closed. So we always had really the best to teach and to lead and to organize and coach. And so I think you just, you were raised with that feeling of that you can succeed, or that you've succeeded, then you feel like, yeah, I can succeed,
Yeah, well.
So it's a mentality.
And then that also, did that kind of bleed into a sense of like entitlement over, or like a sense of like maybe superiority over, because what
I think you could get a lot of that.
What these guys were saying when they came, they said that when substitute teachers would come in or outsiders would come in, you guys would kind of like test them a little bit, like just kind of push and see how far you could take it.
I think there was probably some feeling of I'm better than you are when between Western High and Macomb. I think we felt that we were better in many ways than they were, and that's
interesting to me.
But I also had friends at that school too, so because there were other venues where you could meet up, teen canteen, there were swimming pool, there were other places where you saw, so we always had friends at the other school too.
Now, what's that, teen canteen?
Well, it used to be a YMCA group of, and it's too bad they don't have something like that nowadays, because we would meet, there was a board and there were members from each school on it that would meet to plan activities for the location, and it was located at that time atop of, where the rehab center is on the square. I don't know if you've been up on the square, but there's a big room up there. I don't know if there's now. But you could go up there, you could play pool, you could play ping pong, you could dance, you could have Cokes. People go there after school. Then we'd have dances like at Christmas and New Year's, and we'd plan them. The school would have people from each school, and that's where we kind of interconnected probably the most, was in that particular spot. And both my husband and I were on the team board, so we knew kids from Macomb High that were serving the same capacity for that school, and we would plan stuff. And it's a shame they don't really have anything like that now.
And did it cost money to go to Western High?
No.
No, it was free.
We had to buy our books.
Whereas Macomb High, they just gave
them. Or I think they either rented them or gave them, but we had to buy our own. That's interesting. But back then they didn't cost what they do now.
Yeah.
So, no, there was no tuition. My family was not that well off because my dad had just come back from the war. He was not from Macomb, and he was starting a business. So my mom was working; they were both working. So we were not certainly from a background. And some of this, that was another interesting thing about the student population, is you had some teachers' kids, obviously professors' kids in the class, but you had a wide range of economic, socioeconomic groups. Probably the only thing we didn't have was any ethnic diversity. You really didn't, but Macomb didn't at that time have much either. So
it's pretty isolated.
But the families that we did have went to Macomb High, and I don't know. When I think back, I think there may have been some discrimination on the part of the administration not to let them in, but I couldn't say that for sure. But knowing the times, it was the 50s. I would not be 40s and 50s. I would not be surprised.
Yeah. Another thing that they talked about when they came was how everyone was in a band. They said,
band?
Yeah.
Like music?
It seems like there was, like, everyone had a band.
Oh, you mean like a band?
Like a band.
Okay. Well, maybe that was more their time because they're younger than I am.
Oh, okay. So that was more.
We were in the folk. Yeah, we were the beginning of the Kingston Trio, Limelighters, the folk era, and the Beatles too. They came in right when I was a senior, and my brother was in a band. But and when I think of my class per se, I can't remember any of them doing it or below us. So maybe that happened when I graduated. They had more people involved in that.
Yeah, they said that everybody wanted to.
You could be in a band. You two could be in a band.
That's fun. And then was there a dress code or anything?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes. And was it sexist against the girls?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had to wear skirts.
Yeah.
I can remember the day we had the assembly in the auditorium where they announced King and Queen for homecoming. I had my cheerleading uniform on, so I had pants on. They were stretch pants we could wear because it was football season. But when they announced, I had to go backstage and put on a skirt to be able to get on stage.
Oh my gosh.
I could not wear slacks on stage.
Wow.
Yeah, and they had it back there waiting for me. My little pleated skirt. So. Were they like checkered?
Was it like Catholic school uniforms?
No, you could wear anything you wanted.
Oh,
but
okay.
You just couldn't wear
so
pants
like
or jeans
code.
you had to wear, and they couldn't be short shorts. Yeah, that was in college though. When I was in college, I was in college when you couldn't wear pants either. So.
And did you go to college here at Western? So how was it As far as the building itself, because I love Simpkins. I love going to school. I mean, I love.
It still smells like high school.
Does it?
I
Yeah.
cut through there and it's like.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
It's
hasn't
just a
changed
beautiful
hardly at all.
building. I
Yeah.
love it. And then but it used to be you had access when you were in like kindergarten and things outside and inside, and there was a lot of like outside learning too. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
well, we used to have doors that would go, and not to think about it, did go directly outside to that area. I remember kindergarten, we used to go out there.
Because that's actually the room where
Yeah.
my class is now. This
And
class.
see, my brother was an English major, and
Yeah.
then he got his master's degree, and he was taking master's degree classes in his
In
kindergarten.
his kindergarten room.
He said,
That's
talk about
bizarre.
deja vu all over
Yeah,
again.
that is bizarre.
It was bizarre. But we did do a lot of stuff outside, and the playground was actually where the tennis courts is now. We had a big playground
Okay.
in that area, and that's, of course.
And then Corbin Olson was like an airplane hangar or something like that?
Well, that's, I think, where the barracks used to be during World War II.
Okay.
The married student housing, for,
Mhm.
I think, the people coming from the war, that, GI Bill stuff.
Mhm.
Because they were built in '63 when I was a senior in high school, because I remember Corbin and Olson being built. Because
Okay.
we had our English class right on that side, and you could
And you could hear
you'd hear the hammering and the sawing and the things like that. So those were built that
It's gotta
63, 64 year.
It's got to be interesting to see him remodeling.
I know, and it's amazing that those buildings have withstood better. I mean, they've stood up better than Wetzel. I mean, Wetzel was built after I started college.
Oh,
And
really?
Corbin and Olson are still, at least structurally, seem to be sounder than
Yeah.
some of the ones that were built
Wetzel's.
later on. I know it's falling
Yeah.
apart.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm glad to see those be rehabbed. I hope they.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I hope we can keep
Survive.
filling them, right?
Yeah.
Hope
Yes.
we keep coming.
Yes, that would be good.
Well, I guess I'm trying to think. Was there like a party scene at your school? I mean, like as opposed to like, because now, I mean, in high school, kids are doing drugs a lot and drinking early and things like that, and there's problems with that stuff. I mean, I went to a Catholic school where it was a big problem. I mean, things like that. So
Yeah.
was it not? It wasn't really a
What we
thing
did
back
was
then.
so tame, probably, but I do remember having slumber parties my senior year. I don't remember anything prior to my senior in terms of alcohol, but I remember that, and I'm seriously, I'm not putting paying myself, but I just didn't do that stuff back then. I was like taking care of the person who did and got sick doing it.
Yeah.
But we would have slumber parties, and you drink at the slumber parties, and we'd go out at night and do stupid stuff. Nothing illegal. Well, we climbed over actually and jumped. They used to have a trampoline place on Jackson Street, which would now be illegal because it would probably somebody be hurt. But the trampolines were in the ground, and you could pay to jump. Now they have them where the whole thing is, so you don't hurt yourselves. But we would go there in the middle of the night and jump on the trampolines and just do things like that. So, in terms of there was never any drugs of any kind that I ever saw. In terms of like marijuana or any of that stuff. Even in college, I didn't run into any, and I'm sure everybody. I laugh because I say I think every member of my family, including my parents, probably smoked dope, and I never did because I never found it anywhere. I wasn't looking, but I never found it. But in terms of high school, the parties that we had, we did a lot of dances. I mean, back then dances were really big, and you'd have a dance in high school, and then you'd go out afterwards and get a Coke, and stuff like that. Or I think the only time I remember actually having alcohol available was after we graduated. We went to this one guy's house, and he had a lake, and we all sat around the lake, and I think we had like one beer, but nobody.
Was that the drinking age would have been 18?
Yeah, we would
still?
have. No, I think it was. Honestly, don't know. I think it was 21.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
We did have a class trip to New York, which was really a highlight. It's one of the highlights, I guess. We went to the World's Fair, and we saved it. That's what you did is you saved all 4 years, or 6, including junior high, doing bake sales and all this stuff to be able to do that, to have a senior trip. And so we did. We got to go to the World's Fair. And we actually, I can remember this, we were staying I don't remember the hotel we stayed at, but the sponsors would say, okay, you can go out and just be in by midnight. So we went down to Times Square, and we walked around, and nowadays you'd never be able to do that. But we saw Elizabeth Taylor and Robert Burton coming out of a theater, but a couple of the guys, I think the drinking age there was 18, and so a couple of students who had turned 18 already did drink, and then the year after it, I think a bunch of them did, and then they got in trouble, and then they stopped doing class trips because it got.
These.
Is that what they did?
Warren said that it was his year that they ended it, and everyone was really mad because they had been doing all the bake sales and everything all up until, and apparently the dean's son or daughter, or not the principal something, was in the last class to do it. So there's some sort of scandal there.
Well, it could have been Kanawha.
Yeah, that was it.
He was president of the university.
Yeah, and so
Muriel.
Yeah, so he cut it off after her year.
I could see that. He was not the best president.
Not the nicest guy.
No, and when we were in college, he hated fraternities and sororities, so he was just deaf on any kind of social.
And what sorority were you in?
Tri Sigma.
Oh, really? That's cool.
My husband's Phi Sig, which they have gone by the wayside.
Yeah. Well, then, can you list off like the clubs that you were in high school?
Well, I was president of Girls League. It was just basically an organization of all the girls in high school, and so we'd meet and have programs and.
And you were the president?
Educational, yeah, my senior year I was. And then Spanish Club, and I was National Honor Society, and cheerleader, and I can't remember. I'd have to look at my yearbook. I didn't. I should have looked, but I mean, there were just a lot of things you could do because, again, like I said, there were so few of us that you had a chance to be pretty much do anything you want to. I'm much more musical now than I was then. I did choir and stuff up through junior high, but then in high school I was so busy with other stuff. I didn't do band or choir or chorus. Now I play the piano and stuff like that because it's something I can do as a hobby kind of thing. But back then it was pretty much focused on the sports, and we couldn't do sports, so cheerleading was my sport in high school. And then I graduated 4th in my class, so I got a scholarship to Western because they gave. It was funny. I should explain this because it makes me sound smarter than I am. They always gave scholarships to the first 2 graduates. So it was the salutatorian, the valedictorian, and the salutatorian would get full rides tuition if you majored in a teacher education field.
Oh, okay.
So the one who graduated number 1 actually went to Bryn Mawr, which is a very uppity, very good school on the East Coast.
Okay.
And number 2 went to Oberlin in Ohio, which is also a very strong academic school. Yeah. And then number 3 took it, and so I got the 4th one because the first 2 declined. So I was able to get the.
And was that because they didn't want to be teachers? Do you think?
Well, they just wanted to go other places, and I had other. And the number 1 graduate, she majored in Spanish. Yeah, and then number 2, I think she was actually home ec, and she's here in Macomb now and teaches English at the high school. So the one who graduated. And see, that's funny because you remember because there were so few of us. We remember.
And do most of them still live around here?
No, not most, but there's probably, we had 51 in the class, and I can think of offhand probably 10 that stayed in the area. So percentage-wise, that's not a bad percentage for a high school class. But
it has to be interesting to have seen Western itself grow and change.
No, and I've been part of it, too, because I did my undergrad and my master's here, and then I worked. I worked almost 30 years, so I've been at Western.
So you saw it go from to a party school.
Oh yeah, it's
kind of
every.
Yeah, that's funny.
It goes full circle.
Because now I'm just thinking, if there was a high school and a grade school, it would just be like really like.
Oh, I mean right here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I feel like that would be like bad. It would be a bad influence on those kids.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think students react to younger people, maybe for the older kids in the grades, but I think, because it was at Horban Hall for a while, obviously, when Simpkins closed and then it moved to Horban, it was there for a while. So I think, I'm hopeful that students react more positively when they're around younger people than they might have if they weren't here.
Yeah.
But I mean, the concept of the university school, I think, was so good, but it just... And I'm not too clear on how it died out, because I think there's still one at Illinois State.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
But apparently somehow the funding or whatever, for the smaller ones are dried up, and they weren't able to sustain it, because, that is too bad, because I think it's a great philosophical idea to have that kind of a climate, environment, and a place to train teachers.
It builds from within.
Mm-hmm. It's a good community-based concept.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then also, just thinking of kids that went to school with you lived where now it's student housing, right? A lot of the times. I mean, just around campus.
Around campus. Possibly not. And I grew up on Ward Street, and right now my house is a rental. Yeah. It's right on top of it.
Things like that. Yeah.
You hate to see that happen. But, you hate to see some of the streets that were residential, and really nice residential streets, become not that way. And that's, part of the growth is, that's one of the inevitabilities of it, which is a shame, because I hate to see it too. But, that is a problem. I agree that that's probably going to be a continuing problem, partly because of the size and just the change in the student body and the way people behave.
Yeah. How were the lunches at school? What was that situation like? Gross.
And actually, as high school students, we didn't have to eat in the school. We were allowed to leave and come back. So most of the times we walked up to the Dairy Queen and came back, or didn't have very good lunches actually health-wise. But in grade school, you did have to eat in, and I can still remember seeing spinach. They would get canned spinach of all things to give to a child even now, and it would just be a big glob of green. And they would have monitors walk on. You had to take 3 bites of everything, And then beets. I've never to this day been able to eat beets or canned spinach. I love spinach, but not canned. So they were not, I wouldn't say they were very good. And you could smell, the entire school, you knew what was coming for lunch because you could smell it through the entire.
And the lunchroom was when you, on like the level floor and now what's like the theater kind of room? Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's a band room or something that they use. And it's so funny because I've gone to theater productions in the theater on the 2nd floor, which is where we actually had our assemblies. That was the auditorium. And, as a child, that always looked just enormous to me. And now, of course, they've taken out the theater seating and stuff, but the space itself is the same, but it's tiny, small. Yeah. And we'd have the entire school, in there for assemblies. That would be, you go 7th through 12th. I guess the grade school didn't, but it would be the 6th grades would be in there for the assemblies.
And what was COFAC at that point?
College,
the auditorium, COFAC, that's attached to Simpkins now.
Oh, that was the gym. That was the main gym.
But was that for basketball. The high schoolers?
Yeah, no, that was grade school through. Well, there was this little gym is where we ate lunch, and that was on the 1st floor. Yeah. Then COFAC was the high school gym, but that's where the grade school played their games too, because that was the seating. We didn't have any seating in the little gym. That was more for PE. And stuff like that. But the big gym was where the 7th through 12th played basketball. And they had music there, and we had PE in there,
So how exactly did you and your husband meet then?
Well, again, with 51 students in the class, it's hard not to, run into each other. But we actually got to know each other more at that teen canteen through there. And then, I was a cheerleader, and he was on the football team and stuff.
So,
pretty much. And actually, his mom, again, had been in school with my mom. So, families knew each other going way back. And so it was just...
So did he take you out one night?
Yeah.
Just asked you out?
Yeah.
What'd you guys do?
I think we went to teen canteen, and then it was right before homecoming. And I'd already agreed to go with another guy who was a good friend of mine. We weren't, crazy, but we were just really good friends. And then when Joe and I met up, then this other guy went to Joe and said, if you want to, you can take her to homecoming. So he did, and that was the rest is history. He just pretty much went steady from then on. So.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
I know. Doesn't happen that much anymore.
No, not really. Too much drama these days.
Yeah,
things like that.
For sure. For sure. I mean, we were. When you look back, it was very much the classic '50s, '60s kind of high school.
Grease.
Like Peggy Sue.
Yeah.
Yeah, Grease. Yeah. All that kind of stuff.
Well, that's cool.
So.
I'm jealous. Sounds fun.
Well, it was. But, on top of it, probably the most beneficial part was the education was absolutely fabulous. Yeah. And, we all had teachers that we didn't like, but I just, I can't think of that many, and most of them we really liked.
And did you send your kids to Macomb High? Is that where they
We had no choice. Western wasn't here then, yeah.
But you would have sent them to Western, definitely.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, if I could have, just for the size.
Yeah.
The fact that it was smaller, and you had the opportunity to do so much more and get involved in things. So, because it closed, like I said, when my sister-in-law was a senior, and that would have been in '74. Did they say '72 or '74?
Oh, shoot, I can't remember.
I think it was '72 because my husband was teaching the year that it closed there, and then he was absorbed by Macomb High, so he taught at Macomb High then. So it would have been either '72 or '73.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Neat.
It was an era, and it is interesting how people stay. When you look at the Facebook page and you see postings, and even though I don't know all the people personally, I recognize the names because again, siblings were somewhere near me in school, or a parent, I knew because of my parents or something like that, because of just being a small town in general.
So is it a lot of families kind of getting together a lot outside of school and things like that? Were all the families kind of friends, parents and things like that?
Yeah, when we were in school, yeah. In some cases, not every single case, of course, but because, again, of the size of the town, that you almost always knew everybody's family who was in your class anyway, and in some kind of cases they were friends too. Like one of my best friends in school, our moms were best friends in high school. And went all the way through school together, and we've stayed friends. You know, we're on Facebook, and we see her when I see her when she gets back to town. And I always met with her mom when she came back to visit. My mom's passed away, but we'd always get together for lunch. So, you know, there were certain relationships like that where you, and I've kept in touch with, more so with my high school friends and with many of my college students because again, the longevity of being with them so long and so many years, and in such a really, you know, special setting.
Yeah.
And then many of them went on to college. I mean, some, you know, a good number of my class went on to Western anyway.
Yeah. Just because it was kind of an easy transition.
Yeah, probably at least a third. And the other thing is when you were, and I didn't do it and should have, but as a junior or senior in high school, you could take college classes, which you can still now. The area college kids can, but that started for the high school kids. That started back when I was in school, that you could do, you know, college classes.
Yeah, good college credit for you. Can you tell me about Lake Ruth at all? Any scandalous stories about kids?
Well, we always heard that it was named after Lake Ruth, who drowned there, and that's not true.
Oh, bummer.
No, and actually growing up, we'd ice skate there.
Okay.
And then they put a fence up because they were worried about, I guess, somebody being hurt, and then they took it down because I guess they realized it wasn't deep enough to really be hurt, you know, and so I think people still do that, but haven't been that cold enough to do it lately. But
there's a sign that says you can't.
Yeah. Oh, well, we could.
I know. It's a different time, I guess. Kids would abuse it now. They'd get drunk and fall in the...
Well, I'm surprised it happened because, I mean, you could.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And some year, and it wasn't when I was in high school, it must have been when I was working here, didn't a goalpost, did you ever hear about a goalpost winding up in Lake Ruth?
No, I never heard that story.
I think it did.
Was it
Maybe it was when I was
recently?
in school. That wouldn't have been real recently, but it could have been the 80s. I don't know. But somebody did.
Did you ever have any supernatural experiences at Simpkins? Because, you know, there's all those stories, too.
Simpkins goes.
The little girl.
No personal ones.
Yeah. It's funny. I've just heard stories of people seeing people or ghosts.
In the halls.
Yeah, just walking around.
That'd be a great movie.
Yeah, but, well, it's a scary place. I guess there's tours taken, too. And you know what's even scarier is Sherman on that auditorium up top. That is a creepy place. I don't know if they're...
But it could be an absolutely beautiful place if they could fix it up.
Yeah,
because of the architecture.
Because I work for West Tech, and so we've done shows there and things, and it really is really cool.
Well, I know that's where they bring a lot of the admissions tours up there, and the way it looks now, like, I hate this to be your first impression of Western because of it's, you know, you get peeling off the floor. But if they could really redo it, that would be a really spectacular room.
It would.
Of course, the museum used to be there. The one that's uptown now, you'd walk through there and it was really kind of nice because they'd have all this stuff that went back to the 1800s, clothing and artifacts and articles and things like that. But then when they took it out, it just left this giant.
So, this isn't going to show my ignorance of history. Were you in, what grade would you have been in when Kennedy was
senior
assassinated?
And yes, I do remember exactly where I was.
Yeah.
We were sitting in study hall, which would have been up where the writing center is now.
Okay.
That was the library.
Yeah.
And then there was a big room off that, which was study hall. And we were in the study hall when it was announced, because they had a TV in there, and so they turned it on, and we all sat there and watched the announcement. Oh, yeah, it was...
Was everybody crying and things like that?
It was horrible. Man. But I think, I remember also being swayed by my dad, who was a staunch Republican, and when Kennedy and Eisenhower, when Eisenhower was president, and then Kennedy and Nixon were running, he had me convinced that the world would actually come to an end if Kennedy won, so I was just absolutely devastated when he became president, but then I really got to like him, and so then I was devastated when he was not. So it was like,
that's funny. So your dad was pro-Nixon?
Oh, yeah, he was very Republican.
Eat his words a little bit later down the line?
Not my dad.
He's right, it's all right.
Yeah, he pretty much stayed a Republican. I pretty much am not. But, that's okay. It was the times.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I think those who served in World War II had just a different, they were big Eisenhower folks, so that just kind of carried on to whoever replaced him. So
people that were in your class and are your age, most of them, their dads, a lot of them were in World War II?
I would think so. I mean, I'm trying to think if we ever really talked about it, but they would have been, most of them would have been of the age to be, well, my dad was a little older, though, come to think of it. He was 8 years older than my mom, so... Well, I'm sure there were several.
And he served in the war then, correct, you said?
Mm-hmm. Well, my dad was actually stationed at Camp Ellis, which was an Army camp just outside of town here, between here and Havana, kind of.
Yeah.
And that's how he met my mom. He and his buddies flipped a coin one night to go to either Lewiston on a Friday night or Macomb, and it turned out Macomb, and he met my mom, and she was like 19 and bowled over by this 27-year-old soldier, and 3 months later they were married. And it was wartime.
That's crazy.
And the next year he had to go overseas, and my brother was actually born while he was overseas, and he was a year old before my dad.
What year would that have been?
It would have been 44. My brother was born in 44.
Well, so the war was ending.
It was winding down, yeah. But he was an interpreter, so he wasn't on the front lines, but he did come back with a gun. You know, I mean, they all came back with guns, so. Or he's got to see the Luger.
Yeah.
And they took off a dead German soldier. I'm not sure he did or not, but he used to tell stories.
That's pretty cool.
So, yeah. But he was 27, so he would have been, you know, he was just a little bit older than maybe some of the other fathers, depending on which that was in.
That would have been kind of old for the war.
Mm-hmm.
He would have been towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
I guess.
But I'm sure many of them were, just because, you know, sometimes, you know, if they had the youngest sibling in my class, then their parents were older too, because they had children who were already out. So I'm sure we had a significant number.
And so was there? Did you see any like Vietnam protesting and things like that?
Definitely.
And that would have been in the 60s, right?
Yes. Yeah, we were right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
There was a time when in Simpkins Hall, of course, you had the English building and you had ROTC there as well. And they still have a gun range now, but they both inhabit. Military science was in that building with the English department.
Why would they do that?
Well, and we had really good friends, actually. Colonel Ted Raymond was in the military science department at the time, and he was such a non-Army type. He was theatrical, and my parents were involved in the theater with him, and he was just the funniest guy in the world. But there was a time when there was a march on Simpkins Hall because of protesting the Vietnam War, and the fact that military science was in there, and that's where the students targeted their protests. And there was a march. I worked at the bookstore on Adams Street. It's not there anymore. It's not the one that's there, but there was one beside it called The Bookstore, which is where the International Sandwich Shop is now. And so I was working, and I remember seeing the march go by. And then Kent State happened while I was in
high
college.
School or in college?
Yeah. So yeah, we had a lot of the 60s turmoil was part of the college part.
And so was it a lot of just hippies walking by?
Yeah, we had a few. But I wouldn't say a lot. You know, I think we're still very much...
It's very isolated.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you had, like my brother, and they would sing protest songs, you know, but they didn't do anything like firebombs.
And what's your brother's name?
Christopher Strong.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, because your maiden name is Strong.
Yeah. And actually, he was an English teacher for many years in Woodstock, up around Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
And then he just retired like 4 years ago, and they live not too far. They live in Weematuck, which is on the way to Canton. It's a housing thing around the lake.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you're
So we play music about once a week. And
oh, that's cool.
he's very big in guitars. Everything with strings.
Did he like Grateful Dead and?
Well, he liked any kind of
Bob
music.
Dylan, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
loved Bob Dylan.
Jefferson Airplane.
Yes, we did all the folk things for sure, and he was very much into bluegrass for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's cool.
very bluegrassy, and Tom Lear. I don't know if you know some of that.
I'm sure my roommate would.
Yeah.
He loves bluegrass music.
Well, Tom Lear was not bluegrass. He was more the protest stuff,
okay.
Vatican Rag and Poisoning Pigeons in the Park and Girl Scout marching song.
I knew the song that's like, it's the one about, whoopee, we're all gonna die or something like that.
I don't know.
Something about, I can't remember. I think Country Joe sings it maybe. I don't remember. Yeah. I like that one though. Music had more of a purpose, I guess.
Yeah, and actually my brother and somebody who just retired as a teacher from here, from the society department, Ken Midas, had the first coffee house at Western, and it was called the Deep End, and it was just on the square downstairs off one of the things, and they had, served coffee, and people could have open mic night, and they'd play music.
What years would that have been?
Well, he was 2 years ahead of me in school, so that would have been probably 62. He graduated in 62, and so it would have been 63, 64.
And they just opened
65.
a coffee shop?
Yeah. Played music and sold coffee, and I made sandwiches.
That's cool.
And I think it lasted about a year.
Really?
It was hard to do that and study and, do all that kind of stuff too. But it was really fun while it was going on. And some really good talent from the university would, come down, kids that, just would get up and perform.
I wonder, is it where the cafe, kind of that?
No, it was actually, you know where Diamond Den is? It's a jewelry store on the square, and then there's an alley beside it.
Yeah, I think I
It
know what
was
you're talking
down, there was a stairway that used to lead down under that, so it was really underground itself. So
That's
it was
neat.
kind of, you know, I'm sure people thought it was subversive, but it wasn't. It was
Yeah.
just a place to go and play music and drink hot chocolate, which
Mm.
seems so tame. When I
Yeah.
think about it, we actually drank hot chocolate.
about.
That's what we said.
No, you can see the forum. It's
I
just a
know.
mess.
Oh, you know,
It's a
that's
horrible place.
different era.
Yeah.
Different era.
Well, thank you for
Those
doing
were
this.
fun. Well, this was fun. Fun
Yeah.
walk down memory lane.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay. Well, I hope your paper goes well. If you think of anything you need to ask or forgot as you're writing it, just shoot me an email.
Yeah.
Because I check it pretty much a couple times a day. So
Oh, yeah, I
if you need
definitely
any
will.
fillers or anything like that, I'd be happy
Yeah. All right, I'll
to
conclude
conjure
it.
up some memories.